not everyone was born attractive or equally attractive. Not everyone was born equally smart. Not everyone was born to parents who were good parents or situations that are equally good. Birth happens and there's inequality at birth. Well, that's probably a good clue that inequality is part and parcel of life on Earth, and that each human journey is meant to be different, not equal, not the same.
CEO and co-founder.
Sam Zell, the founding partner of
Now I'm here, co-founder.
Ethan Penner has the mindset of a scholar and a philosopher. In his 20s, in the 1990s, he completely changed how real estate finance worked and reached great heights of success, got to learn from some of the most successful people in the world. Ethan's written a book, Greatness is a Choice, to inspire the next generation to choose greatness. He also writes about what our society needs in order to remain a place where people can be great and where our civilization can thrive. I'm excited for you to meet him. Ethan, wonderful to have you here today.
Couldn't be more excited.
Before we dive into your book, which I want to ask you about, you grew up in a blue-collar city of Yonkers, is that right?
Yeah.
Tell us about your journey to Wall Street from there. What was your life like early on?
I mean, it was very, I would say, inadvertent path to Wall Street. No one in my neighborhood wore a suit and tie. There was not a single suit and tie in my field of vision as a young man. I had the very great good fortune, however, to have two scholars as parents. Although my parents were divorced, both influenced me. And I had a Jewish upbringing and was sent on scholarship, even though we were quite poor, to an extremely affluent private school that was a yeshiva. So I had learned half the day in Hebrew and ultimately in Aramaic as well, and had just the most incredible intellectual challenge as a young man in that school. In fact, I would say to this day, and I've been around many of the smartest, so-called smartest people in the world, I've never been in a more intimidating room than my 7th and 8th grade classes.
Aramaic is interesting. I didn't realize that was studied in the U.S. very often.
Well, in my school, we had to study the Talmud in 7th and 8th grade, and it's written in Aramaic. And so we had to become competent in Aramaic in order to study the Talmud.
That was the language, I guess, that was spoken at the time of Jesus.
Jesus
as well.
spoke Aramaic, apparently, yes.
Very, very, very cool. I've also studied the Talmud, but not in Aramaic. I need to up my game.
I'm happy to work with you on that. I need to review it. It's been a long time.
My wife would be into that. We have the Hebrew immersion school. So for our audience who don't follow finance closely, can you explain how you helped reshape the real estate industry in the 1990s? What you did was something that really changed a lot of how finance and real estate worked that decade. Like, what'd you do?
Well, I came around through structured finance. Like the world of structured finance and securitization the development of that coincided with my career. And so I kind of became a pioneer and a leading figure on Wall Street in my 20s, which is very odd for a young man to do that in a field like that. But because it was a new business, there was no one with any relevant expertise. So I kind of came in and I had as much as anybody.
It's a little bit like in the tech world, when you do something totally new, you get to be in charge, even if you're a kid.
No matter how young you are. Yeah. No one had more expertise than me or experience. So from that kind of application of securitization on single family mortgages, I had standing on Wall Street, having built that business at Morgan Stanley and run it. I had big standing on Wall Street, and I saw in the early 90s when all the lenders, which had been all regulated lenders, abandoned the real estate market simultaneously.
Basically, everyone's blowing up after the crisis.
Yeah, and you know what happens, as you probably know, in the regulated financial world, it's a light switch on and off because regulators say, do this, and everyone does it, or don't do this, and everyone has to not do it. And when an industry is dependent upon that group of lenders, when the light switch goes off, it's pretty bad. There's nowhere to go. And so in 1991, when the light switch went off for real estate, the real estate industry found itself completely without a lending community to service it.
For what type of real estate?
All real estate, all commercial real estate. So it didn't matter whether you had an apartment, a shopping center, a hotel, an office building. It didn't matter whether it was highly occupied, wonderful piece of real estate with tremendous stability and income. You could not get a lender to quote a loan. And in that moment, I thought, well, securitization and the introduction of the bond market to this business seen like a natural.
Can you teach our listeners what is securitization in this
So
context?
securitization is simply the packaging of loans, let's say in this case, making loans to borrowers, packaging those loans, transferring them into a trust, and have the trust issue securities or bonds backed by those loans. So the collateral for the loan, for the securities, is the loans.
And this is where you could take a bunch of loans together and you could sell off different tranches. of
Different
them.
senior levels of seniority. So the senior most are collateralized by all those loans in a senior fashion, and the junior most essentially insure the senior bonds for credit risk. And different risk gets different payments.
Very
right?
safe debt, riskier debt, and then something that functions more like equity on the very top of the stack.
Yeah, or highest yield, right?
yield.
Like junk bonds, really.
Yeah.
And so from a pool of loans, you issue bonds that could be rated anywhere from, and will be from AAA all the way down to unrated.
So you transform this industry by creating this ability to fund all these things that couldn't be
Right,
funded.
through the bond market, right? Up until that moment, the bond market had no active participation or access points into real estate. And I kind of opened that door or built that bridge for that wealth of money to kind of come in and express itself into real estate.
Kind of like how Michael Milken had a little bit in the 1980s. with
Exactly
junk
the
bond
same
markets.
thing. Exactly. I was the Mike Milken of real estate, as they said.
And so you did this. You had a lot of financial success in the 90s. What was next? I mean, you've always had a unique approach. You know, where you're a student of human behavior, you're interested in philosophy. What did you do after that?
Well, I think that, you know, as I've come to learn about myself in life, you know, at the outset of my life, I was driven like all poor kids. I just want to solve for financial stability.
Or when you're 20s,
I don't want to be poor anymore, you
yeah.
know? And I
very-
really want to make sure my mother, who's a single mother, was not going to grow up and grow old in poverty, right? So, I mean, I had to kind of like, let's solve financial issues first and foremost.
Mm-hmm.
And then by the time I was in my 30s, I had solved it according to my own vision of what that meant. And I kind of learned a lot about myself, which is I love building businesses. I love really challenging markets and challenging situations. I love dislocations, and I love because it opens the door for creative solutions, which I enjoy being a part of bringing. I don't love rinse and repeat. And that's really how you get very rich, I've learned in life. Like rinse and repeat
keep
people,
doing the same things.
they get very rich. The pioneers, like I am, who create solutions to problems and then get bored as soon as they've kind of solved the problem, they get rich enough, but they're not really the richest people in the world.
You got to hire someone who works for you to do the rinse and repeat.
I
Come on,
didn't
Ethan.
figure that out. Exactly. I actually don't I don't have the patience to talk to those people. Actually,
I know. That's a tough part. You're the creative guy. When we talk about the university in your book, but you're still doing stuff on the business side. You launched a REIT in January. Tell us about that.
So I have a couple of businesses that I decided. Sam Zell was one of the kind of more influential people in my life. I got, because I had this meteoric success in touching real estate at a very young age, all the people in real estate were beating a path to my door because I was the only lender in the town.
Yeah.
And you'd like this because I really didn't know much about real estate. So people like Sam Zell would come in. There was no one else to borrow from. So they would be talking to this 31 or 32-year-old kid saying, can you help basically save me? And I would say, listen, Mr. Zell, I'm 32. I really don't know anything about, let's say, apartments, for example. But I'm a pretty smart guy, and I do make the decisions about whether I'm going to fund you or not. So here's the trade. You teach me enough about apartments so that I can understand the risk you're asking me to underwrite. And then if I like the risk, I'll lend you the money. So I got an education from people like Sam Zell pretty damn quickly.
He was a real character.
Oh, he was something else.
He passed a year or two ago, right?
About a year ago, yeah.
Oh, yeah. What an amazing
What a
guy.
loss for the world. What a creative man.
I was really I enjoyed his book too. I don't know if you ever saw it.
Great book. No, it's fantastic.
One of the funniest things there, of course, is his father, who had saved them from the Holocaust when everyone was criticizing him. He said he was never able to tell his father he was wrong about anything else the rest of his life, which I thought that was pretty amusing context.
Yeah, but so Sam, I remember the day he was sitting in my office, and it was about 1996. I'm all of 35, and he's like slumped in a chair across from me. It's a dark, wintry day in New York, and he's exhausted. And I say, man, you look tired. And he said, he goes, you have no idea how hard I work. And at the time, he was probably 60-ish or something, and I was 35. And he said, how many hours did you fly this year? And I said, I don't know. I mean, I working like an animal. I think I flew 550 hours on my plane this year. And he said, I flew 750. And I said, and by the way, he's one of those guys who always had to top you, always had to top you, right? So I said, I did the math quickly in my head. I said, I think you're flying every single day. He goes, pretty much. And I said, well, explain to me, like, tell me about your life. And he said, well, I'm the chairman of 9 different companies. 6 of them are public. And I thought, what are you talking about?
So many.
And then he explained to me that he's not the CEO of any of them. And what he does is he has CEOs running these companies who are effectively his partner. And he's their mentor, their advisor. And he travels a lot. He has a great kind of world connectivity. And he learns so much and has so much information from his world travels that he's able to bring incredible value to each of those 9 companies because he's representing them all in the world. And I thought to myself, well, I like travel and I like people and I like collecting information. Maybe when I'm his age, I'll do some version of what he's doing. And I'd forgotten that. Of course, we all forget that. And then about 6 months ago, I was thinking about launching a new fund in my last company that I had started. And I just thought, you know what? I remembered the Sam Zell moment. And I thought, I think it's time I'm like his age. It's time for me to be like a version of Sam. And now since he's passed, the world kind of has a void. They need someone to act like Sam. Maybe I'll act a little bit like Sam. So I said, maybe I'll be non-executive chairman of a few companies, and then I don't have to like deal with people and build companies and go to work every day.
You get the executor to work for you.
I could do what I like to do. And so I thought, well, what do I like in real estate today? And there are very few strategies I really like because I think the world of real estate is like the world, in a bit of turmoil and a lot of unpredictability. But the 2 that I liked very much were I liked owning apartments and operating apartments because people, no matter what the world turns out to be, people have to live in apartments. Yeah. And I grew up in an apartment, so I understand that on a very fundamental level. And the other one is the office building finance business is desolate. There are no lenders for office at any level, at any attachment.
It's a mess right now because the occupancy is down so much.
Right. Well, everyone's run away from it because it's the third rail and no one wants to even talk about it. So I thought, okay, I'm going to become chairman of companies that do those things. And now I got to find people who I trust to actually be the CEO. Well, one of them in the apartment side, my brother has a 22-year-old investment management business that owns and operates apartments. And I know and trust my brother quite well. So I called my brother and I said, and he had wanted to grow and he'd been after me to be his partner and help him grow the business. I said, well, now's the time. I said, I'll be non-executive chairman of your company. And so that's my apartment expression. And then there was a guy in San Diego who I had known for about 25 years who had owned and operated office buildings. And he had a similar vision as that I did. And so I decided that I would kind of support him in an effort to build an office building specialty finance company. So I've got those 2 endeavors cooking, but the good news is it's cooking in Sam Zellian fashion. So it's cooking without me having to be there all the time, every day.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. I'm also the chairman of a few things. That's how I've structured stuff for the last decade. So yeah. I like the Sam Zell, Ethan Penner approach. We'll have to cite you guys. Let's jump into your book a little bit. Your book's called Greatness is a Choice. I really enjoy this book. I think you had about 69 short chapters.
Yes.
Elon would appreciate that number. Sorry. You said some people will ask you to believe that greatness is a gift bestowed upon only a fortunate few, and that is a lie you shouldn't buy into. Greatness is not a gift, but an actual choice we can make every single day. Can you unpack that?
Well, I just think that every minute of every day, if we're in an aware state, we know that we could bring all we have or something less than all we have. And I think that greatness isn't about like, we tend to think about greatness in athletic endeavors, and we see LeBron James as an incredible athlete and we go, well, I can never do that. So therefore he's great and I'm not. But I think that I happen to like cheeseburgers. And so if you go and you have, let's say you go to a restaurant and you
order a very Jewish thing to like, Ethan.
Yeah. And let's say it's an incredible cheeseburger, right? And you go like, well, you taste greatness. And if you're really in an aware state, you go like, whoever did this really brought their very best on my behalf. And we could do that for each other, even in this moment. Like we could be mailing in this conversation or any conversation, or we could be fully present and engaged in a great way. And I think that we all know when we touch someone who's trying to bring their best.
Well, I also do appreciate great cheeseburgers, even though I shouldn't admit it with the rabbis listening. But if greatness is a choice, why aren't we always choosing it all the time? Like, if it's something you could choose, why doesn't everyone choose it?
Well, I think that not everyone, it's why I wrote a very simple and easy to read book, because I think that it's not an idea that is conventionally accepted. I think, again, most people have a self-defeating aspect to their kind of walk around, right? I think that they don't think of themselves as being great or capable of being great.
Your chapter 1 was why you must admire yourself. I guess that's the first.
That's why it's chapter 1.
Yeah.
I was going to make chapter 1 the I think my favorite one, and many people's favorite, is the bubble of joy concept. But I made self-esteem chapter 1 because without self-esteem,
you're not going to choose greatness.
You have no chance at anything, really.
You talk about, you have a bunch of ones. One thing I like is life is hard for a reason. You say our modern cultures try to eliminate hardship. Tell me about this one.
Well, again, if you start with the premise that there's divine perfection to this journey we call life and this world that we happen to be living in, instead of saying how could we correct the world or blame the bad on the devil or some bad luck or whatever, is if we just start with the presumption that everything is meant to be and purposeful. Well, because you've achieved things. If you've achieved anything, you've known that in the path towards achievement,
you struggle.
You've been punched in the nose many times, and it was in those moments that you failed and fumbled. Those were your teaching moments that set you up to be better, to succeed.
If you're not struggling, you're not getting better. And it is this. I think it's important wisdom. Like there's actual real benefits from adversity, which a lot of people don't realize.
Well, people take those moments of failure as shameful moments rather than learning moments. And when you start to think of them as shameful moments, you hide them under the rug and you don't want anyone to know you've failed and fumbled. And you therefore don't really acknowledge it yourself. And I don't know how many biographies of a lot of times public figures. I don't know. I've read, there's one, I don't want to shame the guy, but there's a guy who I don't particularly like, and he wrote his biography, and it was as though he literally never made a mistake in his life. But how many books like that do you read? You're like, and after about like third of the book, you just throw it away. You're like, this is bullshit. It's just bullshit.
It's you have to admit your mistakes to learn and get better, right?
Exactly.
Otherwise it's ridiculous.
Your life's not meaningful. And by the way, as I think I said in the book, the people who try the most are going to make the most mistakes. It's just math,
You're going to have more people angry at you, and you're going to be making mistakes if you're trying a lot of things. I 100% agree. Let's jump to chapter 24. It's the debilitating effect of the victim mentality. And one thing you write that I thought was interesting is you said you learn not to show sympathy for anyone, but you do have empathy.
Yes.
Tell us about the victim mentality, and what do you mean by that?
What I've learned in my life is that when we experience bad things, whatever they are, it could be, like in my case, as I point out in the book, when I was 8 years old and fell off my first bike, and I was a quarter mile from my house, and I had to walk home with bloody legs and pain. There wasn't anyone to feel sorry for me in that moment, and I felt fine. I mean, I got up and I dealt with the pain because I had to, and I had no choice but to walk home in pain. And I was strong. And then I walked into my apartment, and my mother and grandmother saw this cute 8-year-old kid with blood pouring down his knees, and they shrieked, "Oh my God," in horror. And I immediately started crying hysterically because they weakened me, right?
Yeah.
So in moments of challenge, and I think it's played out in my life too, in moments of challenge and failure, you could react in many different ways. And one of them is you could feel victim. You could feel sorry for yourself. Like, oh man, this bad thing happened to me, or this person did this bad thing to me, or just bad luck, or whatever it is. And that is a place of great weakness where you start crying for yourself.
Yeah.
And you can never rebound from that, which most people, I think, unfortunately react to challenges that way. And I think the other way is, you know what? I had to walk home. You know what I mean? I'm a quarter mile from my apartment. I got to walk home. I'm going to suck it up and deal with it. And so what I've learned is when I see people who are in difficult situations that I care about, I don't want to be that person who weakens them or plays to their weakness.
There's something strong about saying you can handle this, toughen up, stand back up again, keep fighting.
Yeah,
right?
you could be empathetic and say like, I mean, this sucks that it happened to you, but you're strong and you'll figure out how to deal with this.
Yeah, there's something in our society that's a little bit too focused on the victim. I think a lot of people who are not living the best lives right now, they're constantly blaming everyone else, and rather than thinking, how am I going to be strong and get through this myself, let's improve things.
Yeah, there's another thing that I learned too, which I think is at play in the society today. I remember when I was a kid and in camp, and I was taking lifeguard instruction, and the lifeguard that was giving instruction was like this monster. He was like 6'2", third-degree karate black belt, and I was this pudgy little 9-year-old kid, and part of it was I had to go rescue him. And of course, when you go rescue someone who's drowning, they're very dangerous to you because their inclination is to put their hands on your head and get some leverage so they can breathe and use you as leverage, and then you get drowned.
Yeah.
And so what he did in the test is to make sure that I went out there to save him, and he tried basically
to drown you.
To drown me, and he was twice as big as me, and he succeeded pretty much. So I didn't pass that test of being a lifeguard that day, but I learned a very valuable lesson that people out there who see themselves weak, right? And too many people do. They see themselves as victims. They haven't been able to deal with their challenges because no one taught them how to deal with challenges in a strong way, in a way that's constructive. They want to drown other people, right? They're drowning, and so they want to drown other people.
There's something about how therapy works today. I don't know if you've seen Abigail Schreier's new book on this, but basically it's like causing this thing you're basically making them weaker based on how we're dealing with them rather than teaching them to be strong.
Well, I mean, I just think about when I was a kid, how the therapy industry has ballooned since then. If you compare like the therapy industry today versus the 1960s or 70s, the 1960s or 70s was all about just suck it up and deal with it, right?
There's something very solipsistic about a lot of it. I do think therapy is important for some people.
I don't disagree with that.
But there's something very dangerous about how it works with the victim mentality.
Well, there's a balance, like there is in everything else, between the message of just suck it up and deal with it. You're good enough to do that, versus run for help and become a permanent victim.
It's probably important dialectic here. When my family was all about just being strong and overcoming it, which I think it works until it doesn't, I suppose.
Yeah.
Chapter 34 for you was the best ideas survive open debate. Tell us about that.
But it's just logical, right? I mean, I think that in the world of open competition, the best wins out. It just, whether it's about ideas or sports, right? Can you imagine in the times when Black people were not allowed to play in professional sports in America? Well, we weren't getting to watch the best players.
We weren't.
We just weren't.
And you let them in, and then it was clear that they deserved to be there.
Well, the people who deserved. And I think that when you create artificial barriers, whether it's not allowing certain people to participate in sports or not allowing certain ideas or certain people that have certain ideas to speak, the best doesn't win out.
It seems like one way people don't allow certain debates is to say certain things are hateful or inappropriate or hurtful, and
we're weaponizing weakness.
Yeah.
We're just weaponizing weakness.
It seems to me it's actually really important. We argue actually it's more important to have truth than to stop people from being offended. And I think this is something our universities in general are really weak on right now. Is it's so important not to offend people that we don't allow truth to win.
There's no question about it. There's a lot of things like weakness has been used as a tool or a weapon to bludgeon other people with ideas that don't feel good. And I think it's just...
I actually think it's so important that we get good at this, that I think all of the kids coming to university should get practice being offended. I think it's actually healthy for them to, we call it microaggressions. I think we should have all of them experience microaggressions. They need to learn that it's okay to be offended and to deal with it.
When I was a kid, I remember when my parents were divorced and my mother went looking for a neighborhood to move to with two little kids. She was looking for a densely populated apartment community where there was kids playing in the street because she had to go to work, and she wanted to know that her kids could be okay with friends and play in the street and all this stuff. And so she found this place, and I was 8 and I was kind of like timid and afraid to go out and just meet people. And she basically threw me out of the apartment one day and said, go out in the playground and just introduce yourself. So I did. And the first kid, I went up to a group of kids and who were gathered in the playground playing some sports. And I started to like introduce myself, and the first person saying the first thing to me was, "Are you Jewish?" And I said, "Yeah, I am." And he said, "So you killed Christ?" And I thought to myself, this is not where I was hoping this would go. Like what the hell, right? Yeah. But I was of the age where people taught sticks and stones can break your bones, but words can never hurt you. And I mean, I didn't allow words or challenges like that to crush me or deter me. And I became friends with all those kids, some of them Jewish and some of them Jew haters, but you just deal with it. You learn how to be resilient in this world. And it's an incredible way to be.
And so, Ethan, in the first part of the book, we've talked about you kind of learn how to find greatness in yourself. In the latter part, you talk a lot about the foundations of a great society. What are the prerequisites for a great society?
Well, first of all, the reason I did that and the reason that belonged in the book is because I understood that you could try as hard as you want to be great, but if you're in a society that squashes those efforts rather than uplifts and encourages those efforts, you're handicapped immensely.
If you were born in the Aztec Empire 3,000 years ago, you probably had no chance of being great for most of the time.
Correct. I mean, or if you were born in the Soviet Union in the 1950s, it was pretty tough.
That's very hard. Yeah.
And I want to make sure, of course, that's why I'm here at the university, to make sure we don't follow that path here and destroy the society, which has, I think one of the things that Barack Obama, who I'm not a huge fan of, said that I do love is when he said, I don't think he said it exactly correctly, but his point was, to everyone who's successful in America, you have to acknowledge that a portion of your success is due to the fact that you were born in America.
We live in a great, or came to America. We live in a great society.
Yes, it's an amazing society that has uplifted people. And I think it's incumbent upon us to remember that always and do our best to protect it. And so I felt that a book about greatness would not be a complete book if I didn't talk about what creates a society that encourages rather than depresses greatness. And the simple answer is it's everything about an architecture of a society has to be one that opens doors, that uplifts people rather than squashes people.
One of the things you said in this part of it was that equality is not the point. And can you explain why inequality can be part of a great society?
Well, again, if you think about, if you want to get clues about the world, pay attention, right? Not everyone was born attractive or equally attractive. Not everyone was born equally smart. Not everyone was born to parents who were good parents or situations that are equally good. And so by definition, because if birth happens and there's inequality at birth, well, that's probably a good clue that inequality is part and parcel of life on earth, and that each human journey is meant to be different, not equal, not the same, with different challenges and different trajectories, which is why I love democracy, which is founded on open dialogue, right? So let's assume you come from a wealthy family and I come from a poor family, and let's assume we've had the journeys that kind of lead from there, perhaps. My needs are as equally important as a citizen of this country as yours. And my needs and my perspectives deserve to be attended to and heard, but that can't happen if my perspective is squashed. You know what I mean? So no one's perspective, a democracy is like all the voices are heard and considered, and there's a continual tug of war to answer the question of what's right today, like what moves are right today, but it only happens from open debate.
This is a very Judeo-Christian perspective, is the equality of dignity. Everyone's needs, everyone's human dignity as a human being is in some sense equal, but then you're saying the equality, everyone's also going to be very different and the outcome's going to be very different, and that's okay.
Of course, and that's fine. And I think that, unfortunately, one of the things that I think has been underscoring what's wrong in American society, which I discovered was rooted in some bad economic thinking since the 1950s, is this envy-based society where we prize materialism as kind of the be-all and end-all. And then all of a sudden, there's a lot of unhappiness for people who feel like they don't have their fair share. You hear the word fair share about a lot of things, including taxes. Yeah. And I think I've been around the richest people, and I've been, as a child, around the poorest people. And I can tell you that the richest people don't have an advantage naturally in happiness and fulfillment. They just don't. And I think each person, whether it be handsome or unattractive or smart or less IQ or more educated or less educated or richer or poorer, they all have God has given them a journey filled with challenges, right? Different challenges, but challenges. And this idea of envy, like if I only had that, or if I only had that, things would be better.
We make this mistake in our own lives a lot. You think I'm just going to get to this point and then everything will be fine. And you realize that that was the wrong thing.
And in the end, that's why my first chapter is self-esteem. Because if you have self-esteem, like if you look in the mirror and you say to yourself, I don't know, I'm a good dad. I'm proud of the fact that I have nice children and that I've been caring to my wife and a good husband to my wife and a good son to my parents and a hard worker who brings an honest effort every day. I think that's the foundation of a fulfilled life. And I think there's nothing else beside that that supersedes that or even matters.
So I want to go, one of the last chapters was chapter 68, the basis of cynicism. Can you explain the famous Milgrim study that you referenced and why is this, it's a dark yet essential
So the
insight?
Milgrim study, I think, can swing someone like me who's a freedom lover into the other camp of like, gee, people do need to be suppressed after all.
There's always dialectics of truth on both extremes here. Let's be clear.
Well, that's the, there's that other chapter that's in there that you haven't mentioned that I do like is the duality chapter, right? Because competing truths do have some bearing, some merit.
That's how the world works.
And that is how the world works. So I think that for those of you who don't know, the Milgrim study was performed by a professor, a Jewish professor in Yale University in the wake of the Holocaust after World War II, who couldn't really understand, come to grips with the fact that ordinary German citizens, not crazy Jew haters or racists, but ordinary Jewish citizens participated in the Holocaust and the killing, the systematic killing of innocent people and civilians. And so he held this study in an office building on the Yale campus in Connecticut. And he invited basically two groups of people, and he split them into two groups, a tester and a test taker, right? And the test takers were given word combinations, so like pencil, cup, right? And you would have to memorize them. So I'd have to know, like, if the tester said pencil, my answer would have to be cup, right? And then the test givers were given cards, like when one of them might have said pencil, cup, and he'd read pencil and the right answer would be cup. And there was a wall separating the testers and the testees. Unbeknownst to the group that was now the testers, the testees were all let go, and there was an actor put on the other side of the wall, and so then the wall had these buttons which showed voltage levels, and so every time the actor or the person taking the test didn't have the right word pairing, the tester was instructed by someone who was a faculty member sitting in the room with the test giver to press the button and increase at an increasing level for each wrong answer, it basically send electrical volts into the body of the person who got it wrong.
They thought they were torturing them.
So this innocent person, for getting cup and pencil wrong, basically, who you didn't know, just an ordinary guy or gal from Hartford, Connecticut, or wherever they were, was being tortured. And so anyhow, some large percentage, I want to say it was 75 or 65%, I said in the book, went all the way, meaning they basically killed the person for giving wrong word pairing answers. And the remainder, who didn't go all the way, who just said, I'm not going to do this, none of them stopped before some crazy 300 volt level, which would have basically, it really delivered a tremendous amount of pain. So it showed you that even in an office building at Yale University, let alone in a concentration camp situation, ordinary people were willing to go to great lengths for silly reasons, just word pairing mistakes.
It is amazing how people respond to authority. I will tell you, certain cultures probably do more than others. And when you're going through an airport in Germany, they're still really, really picky about following the rules. So but I think anyone could make this mistake.
And I think, I think that I grew up my partner in a big part of my career was a large Japanese firm. So I became quite attuned to the Japanese culture, and the contrast between the American way of thinking and the American culture and the Japanese is almost 100 degrees
There's
different.
not as much pushback on authority, so you can see how some of these mistakes could happen even more so.
Yeah,
in
and
these
I think
places.
America has always been messy because we're not follow
We say no when we push
say no
back.
more. But we're learning to not say no. That's scary.
This is something we need to teach people. The COVID stuff was scary on that. You end the book on a note about pessimism and optimism, which is fitting for this podcast, of course, the American optimist. Can someone choose greatness if they're overly cynical or negative?
No.
No. Yeah, you need to be optimistic. I love it. So, we started American Optimist to push back on a lot of the pessimism and cynicism and division in our country we're seeing. What would you say to young people today who are negative on the future and don't want to have kids or believe our best days are behind us? How would you inspire them to greatness?
So I believe that if you look around you today, most of the systems that govern society were systems built like this, I say pre-Edsel, like before there were cars, right? So they are systems built for a different era, and they've been in failing mode for quite some time. But people don't change systems when they're in failing mode. They change them when they've failed and when there's resulting pain. We are now in this period of time when most systems in our world are literally collapsing around us, whether it be, I think, our healthcare system, our social security system, how we care for the elderly, our education system, our financial system. Almost every big system is collapsing. Now, that brings in most people a sense of despondency, like, gee, the whole world's falling around me, but not in me. When me, and I think it should be for young people, see it this way, this is the moment to remake everything, for new visions, for new systems to be erected that are appropriate to serve people's best interests for the next 50 or 100 years.
Yes, there's a time to
And
build.
The young people today are going to have in every field the opportunities of lifetimes, because it doesn't happen all the time when systems all collapse around us, and it's happening right now.
There's so much to fix in healthcare and finance and
It's
education.
incredible.
It's a really exciting
It's
time.
incredible.
I love it. Well, Ethan, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.